I think I can answer that question at different levels. The most concrete injustice we face is when we go to a country and we meet communities who tell us that the land they live on has suddenly been bulldozed away by a company. Like I was in Liberia last week, and a community member came to me and he told me how Sime Darby, which is an oil palm company, bulldozed the land, all the land around his house. And as the land he lives off, he couldn't farm, he had nothing left. So that's a very clear example. Another very clear example is partners from us, partners we work with in tropical forest countries ending up in jail because of the work they do. But I think at a more abstract level, the injustice we face is that things happen to people, like the examples I just gave, without having them any voice in what's happening to them. So that's the injustice we face all the time, that decisions are being made which really affect people's livelihood directly, and they haven't been given a voice in how to address it. And in some cases that is illegalized. The whole legal system is unjust in the sense that it doesn't give people a voice to developments that affect their livelihoods. It's an imbalance of power, of course, which drives it. But there is a lack of check and balances in the system to make sure that people with power are able to misuse their power to such an extent that these large injustices happen. So it's an imbalance of power and a system that doesn't correct that imbalance of power to a rather large extent. That's what's driving it in one sentence. Well, Fern is an organization that really tries to inform and influence EU decision making. So we really try to influence the EU to make sure that in their programs, in their aid programs, in their trade programs, in their policies, they create space for civil society to be heard. A very concrete example is the EU FLEG program, which is a program designed to control illegal logging. But we have used that program, and we think quite effectively, to create space for civil society organizations in tropical forest countries to have a say in the design and in the negotiation of a legally binding trade agreement which defines what legality means in a particular country, and then how that, in terms of the forestry sector specifically, and how that then translates in what timber can be cut and cannot be cut, and what the community rights are that are being respected in that agreement. The people we work with in tropical forest countries, they face real difficulties. I mean, they can end up in jail, they're being harassed. I mean, and it's hard to deal with it. It's hard to see that happen when you are relatively powerless in doing much about it. The other thing is to be really strategic, because you always have to ask the question with whatever you do, who are you empowering, who are you giving more space, and who are you giving less space? And to find allies in the analysis you've done is also difficult. There's a lot of NGOs out there in Europe, but also in tropical forest countries, who don't really want to change the balance of power. They're happy with the status quo. A lot of conservation organizations fall in that category. And so you don't find them as allies very easily, but they're powerful in their own right. So to create enough alliances, both in tropical forest countries as well as in Europe, to come to those really underlying causes which drive injustice is hard. And you need to be very committed. This is not a 9-to-5 job. It's not a 9-to-5 job for the people we work with, it's their life, but also for us, you cannot do this in a 9-to-5 job. I read somewhere, somebody said once, I don't know who it was, but he or she said once that you should measure society by how it treats its weakest people. And I think that that's quite a nice way of saying it. So ideally, you know, in my dream world, you have a global society which treats its weakest people well. Which means that basically you have to address the gross inequalities which there are now, which means we have to reduce our consumption, other people will have to increase their consumption. You need to live in a society where people respect each other's values and where you live within the means of which the earth provides. I mean, that's sort of my ideal of respect, living within the earth's means and without any gross inequalities. And I suppose that means you have to have a system which does have these checks and balances, which I mentioned in the beginning. I think a just future looks like a future where we, as the human race, if you want, live within the means of the earth. That's for one. That the way we live, there aren't very gross inequalities between North and South, and you don't have countries which are just consumers and countries which are just producers of raw materials, like what a lot of Africa is at the moment. They just, export raw materials, they're being refined in China or wherever else, and then, they don't get the benefit of the whole production process. But it also has to be a society where people respect each other's values. So I think, living within our means, without any growth inequalities, equal opportunities in terms of production and consumptions globally, and respect of each other's values, because people have different opinions, and you need to respect that. But how do you create that? That's a very difficult question.